Okay, it says preparing to launch. Okay, we gotta start letting people. Actually, no, I need to screen share first. Okay, it should be live. I'll put it in the chat. Can you guys see it?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And then let me screen share.
Wait, is Alvin gonna come?
Okay, hello guys. We'll be starting in about 2 minutes.
Alvin is here.
Okay, we can wait a few more minutes. It seems like people are still coming in, and then we can get started. Okay, we can wait 1 more minute for people to come in. Okay, I think we can get started. So yeah, here's the schedule. Once again, yesterday we had the cyber ethics first workshop, and today we'll be going over cybersecurity present day and the future. And we'll also have our first speaker event, so that will be covering threat modeling with artificial intelligence and machine learning, which ties really well into our presentation about cybersecurity in the present day and future as well. And then for a quick recap of our other future events that go into this program, we'll also be having our speaker event number 2 this Friday. So that will be about cybersecurity in the industry. And then we'll also have workshop 3 and 4 the following weekend. And finally, we'll have the CTF Cyber Challenge, as well as a final speaker event and the closing ceremony. That's just a quick review of the schedule. And like I mentioned, today we'll be covering cybersecurity event 2 with cybersecurity present day and the future, and then the speaker event with threat modeling with AI. So just as another quick note, this class and others will be live streamed to YouTube to allow those who are unable to join the Zoom to learn more along with the material. So due to our sponsors' limitations, this the Zoom is a girls only attendance event. So for anyone who wants to learn along with our YouTube live stream, that they can go to the link as well, and one of the instructors can probably put that in the chat. Also, we really would love to have you guys have your cameras on, because this class will be more interactive, and we'll have a lot of like back and forth with setting up Azure. So we want to make sure that everyone is really catching along, and it'd be really great if you guys could turn on your camera so we can see you guys as well. All right, so with that, we can get started with today's workshop on cybersecurity present day and the future. And then at the end, we'll also have our speaker come in to give her talk, and we'll have a brief Q&A after that. All right. So I'll stop screen sharing right now, and then Baldwin, you can start screen sharing the slide.
Yep.
Okay, cool.
Oh, sorry, I almost forgot. One quick thing before we get started. I'm just going to launch a quick poll for everyone who's here. And we're going to basically see, just answer like what type of computer you'll be using for the CTF challenge. And this will help us when we actually get to the part of today's lesson. We'll be setting up Azure to allow you guys to participate in this. If you guys could just take a few seconds to answer this poll, that'd be really helpful. Okay, seems like most of you guys are already done. We can just wait a few more seconds for everyone to focus. Okay, cool. I think mostly everyone already filled out this poll. So it looks like most people are using Windows and then Mac, and then a few people are using a Chromebook. So yeah, that works. All right, so let's get right into today's lesson. We'll start off with the recap of yesterday's class on ethics, just to give you guys a brief review. And as always, nothing in this class should be used offensively. Yeah. So first of all, if you guys remember a bit of the lesson, we'd love to get you guys to put something in the chat, or if you want to answer out loud, that's totally fine as well. So for a quick recap, can anyone tell me what is PII? So what does it stand for? And can you also give some examples? If you want, you can put this in the chat, or you can also unmute and let them. Yeah, go ahead, Nisa.
Personal identifiable information.
Yeah, perfect. Do you have also remember any of the examples? Oh, I see Catherine also sending in the chat. Oh, go ahead, Nisa.
Social security cards and other personal information.
Yeah, perfect. So exactly, it includes like your social security number, your passport number, driver's license, address, and even your email address. So a lot of the times this is tied to your identity, and you wouldn't really want to share this information to strangers or any untrustworthy sources. Yeah, good job. All right, so for the next review question, can someone, you can either raise your hand or you can put this in chat. What is the difference between HTTP and HTTPS? Okay, yeah, I see Shannon put S equals secure. Eliana too. Lana, yeah, that's definitely right. Any other answers? Yeah, good job. Chloe said HTTPS encrypts web traffic. Yeah, that's absolutely right. All right, so yeah, you guys were all correct about this. The difference between HTTP and HTTPS is that HTTPS is more trustworthy. So if you see that a site is using HTTP, you would most likely be more careful. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad, but because HTTPS does encrypt your website traffic, it's going to be more secure. So great job answering that question as well. Okay, so we also briefly went over the types of malware. This one may be a bit harder to answer because there's a lot of different types of malware, but if you could just name one or two examples of types of malware, you can put that in the chat or raise your hand. Nice. Yeah, you guys remember our rootkit, Trojan, worm, virus. Yeah, DDoS. Yep. Worm. Yeah, great. You guys remembered a lot of the main types of malware. So I guess we can take a look at a list of them. Okay, so yeah, you guys named most of these. There's also botnet, spoofing. I think you guys also named ransomware as well. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of different types of malware, and all of them are used in different ways as well. So you have to be careful with all of these. Okay, next question. We also briefly mentioned a statistic, and I put a question here as well as a bonus question, so you can see if you remember both of these. So the first question is, what percentage of malware attacks are via phishing emails? And then if you can also answer the bonus, what percentage of people cannot tell the difference between a real and a fake email? Nice. Yeah, so I think mostly everyone got this correct and was able to remember that. So that's really awesome. Yeah, so you guys are definitely right. There's 92% of malware attacks are via malicious emails. And then also 97% of people actually can't tell the difference between real and fake emails. So you can tell it's a pretty big problem. All right, so that's it for the lesson one review. Great job, everyone. Really appreciate the people who answered in the chat and who also raised hands. So we can move right into the lesson two.
Yeah, so yesterday we talked a bit about personal security and being safe on the internet, cyber ethics. Today we're going to talk about cyberspace in the present day and where it's going to go in the future. So let's first start off by defining what cybersecurity is. What is cyber? Well, Merriam-Webster dictionary defines cybersecurity as measures taken to protect a computer or computer system against unauthorized access or attack. So that could be like securing against hackers, using good passwords, updating your computer, all that kind of stuff. And it's really easy to think often that these kinds of things are only useful for like big corporations that have sensitive data and things like that. But really, this is an issue for everyone. I'll go into this more in future slides, but if somebody can, as technology is more integrated into our life, if people can attack that technology, essentially they're attacking our lives. And that seems really like scary, but it is the scary reality of it. If somebody attacks, for example, an electrical grid or water systems, they could essentially take down or hack an entire city and affect people's real lives. Like this isn't like stealing somebody's like Netflix password or something. This is like your real life. Um, and so this is why we're not just like talking about, oh, you got to stay safe online. This is why we're also talking about like staying safe in the real world. So yeah. Um, So here are some macro trends that are in the industry right now. This first one I really like. It's estimated by 2025, we'll see 64 billion connected IoT devices. IoT stands for Internet of Things. So you can kind of think of that like, for example, your Amazon Alexa, your Nest thermostat, your Roomba, Google Home, that kind of thing. And this is really important in cybersecurity specifically. Like this is something that the tech industry is going into, but it's really important for cybersecurity because as we're putting technology into our homes more, it becomes more and more important that we secure those because we're essentially securing our homes. If you think about it, your Alexa or your Google Home could possibly control your Nest thermostat and your Philips Hue light bulbs and your Roomba vacuum cleaner and all these sort of things. In fact, like our Google Home controls our kitchen sink. It's crazy how things work now, and it's great. It's really useful. But the danger with that is if somebody attacks our Alexa or our Google Home, they instantly essentially have control over our entire house. A malicious actor they could increase our heater to like 150 degrees, or they could like flicker our lights on and off. They could turn on and off all of our faucets. And actually, one of my favorite, I've heard of this. This actually happened one time. If you can attack an Alexa that's controlling a Roomba or some kind of like robot vacuum cleaner, and you can make it move however you want, somebody could technically they could get control of your Roomba and chase you around your house with their robot vacuum cleaner. So imagine one day you just walk downstairs and then your Roomba is like target acquired and starts chasing you around your house. So yeah, it's kind of funny, but like also it's very scary. You don't really want your robots to take over you. Um, so yeah. Um, another statistic is there's been a 424% increase in small business cyber breaches last year. This is a lot actually because of COVID. All of these hackers are all sitting at home bored, so they're just like, all right, let's go and like hack all these small businesses because of course they don't have enough things to deal with already. It's quite unfortunate, but yeah, that's another big thing. So this last one, with the healthcare industry, this one is probably, I would say, in my opinion, one of the most impactful things. You can, as healthcare is being more integrated into us and into our lives. I'm talking things like prosthetics. I mean, Elon Musk Elon Musk's like Neuralink. He wants to put brain implants into our brain, which is that's scary in itself. But also, if you think about it, if somebody hacks your brain chip, then they could take over your brain, which is, I think, one of the scariest things here. So that's why, especially in the healthcare industry, IoT securing that is very important. So yeah, I just gave a lot of examples why cybersecurity is not a light thing. We really got to secure our stuff. So here are just a few more stats. The first one's about ransomware. We talked about a bit about ransomware yesterday. One famous one I think you guys may have heard about is WannaCry. Basically, what happens is um, um, hackers will encrypt your computer's file system, and then they'll ask you for money to decrypt it, or they'll just delete all of your stuff. So typically they'll be like, oh, we have all of your data and we're going to delete all of it if you don't give us $100,000 in Bitcoin. And it's very effective because businesses don't really know what to do there. There's not really much you can do. You have to be more proactive, which is why cyber awareness is really important in this situation. Once you get ransomware, there's not really much you can do besides pay the money, which is why it's a really good attack, but it's also very unfortunate for businesses. And the average cost of a data breach is $3.86 million as of 2020. Data breach could be stuff like stealing credit card information, your social PII, stealing your PII, and other stuff like that. And in 2016, 1.4 billion data records were exposed in 1,792 incidents worldwide. This is again, same thing, like credit card information, just all kinds of PII, which you don't want other people to have, especially people that are hackers and want to steal it for bad things. So I think, Ellen, are we going to do a poll here before we go to the next slide?
Yeah, so I'll launch the poll right now. All right. So the poll is, which of these recent cyber attacks have you heard of? So you can just answer, and there's not really any right answer. Just feel free to be honest, and we'll talk about all three of these in the next slide. Oh, nice. A lot of you guys have heard of UC Berkeley and SolarWinds. All right, we can get a few more
Honestly,
seconds. Everyone. Yeah, go ahead, Ron.
yeah, honestly, these results are a bit surprising. I thought SolarWinds would have been the most popular one. Yeah, SolarWinds was really, it was like going around the news a lot a few weeks back. Yeah, the UC Berkeley one was also pretty big. So I'm not surprised Williams racing is not very common. So I'll go over all of them now. So yeah, SolarWinds, this is like probably the biggest and most impactful of all of these. Basically, SolarWinds is a company that provides IT services to a lot of different companies. So they have clients that are like big Fortune 500 companies and federal agencies. So I give some examples here, like Microsoft, Department of Homeland Security. So they have have a lot of these companies' data, and so some hackers were able to hack into SolarWinds. I think they actually found out that there was a Russian hacking group that did this. They hacked into SolarWinds, and since they got into SolarWinds, and because SolarWinds has information about all these other companies, they were then able to get information of all those other companies, which kind of ties back into what I was talking about before with the Roomba example. Just it is on a more bigger and even more impactful scale. That kind of like interconnectedness is good because it's very useful, but it also brings a lot of potential vulnerabilities. This other one, the Williams F1 racing, I put this one in because I actually witnessed this like in real time. So basically, the Williams Formula One team, they plan to launch like their car on an augmented reality app that you would download. But 1 week before the launch, some hackers were able to hack into the app and they leaked the 3D model. So I actually saw the 3D model like 5 minutes after it was released onto Reddit. And so things spread really quickly from there. This one's not very like as dangerous as the one before, but they did have to like cancel all their event and stuff. So it was kind of unfortunate for them, but it wasn't necessarily very dangerous. But you still don't want to do that kind of thing. Kind of lame. Um, and then the UC Berkeley one, this is similar to the SolarWinds on a slightly smaller scale. So UC Berkeley uses a file transfer service called Acelion. I don't know really how to say that. Acelion. And they were hosting a lot of data from University of California employees. So since hackers are able to breach into their systems, they got a lot of information from UC Berkeley. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the cyber attacks. I think before we move on, we can take like questions about anything I just talked about. If anybody has any questions, put it in the chat or unmute. Okay, if not, I guess we can move on then. Turn off the Octane now.
Yeah, I'll screen share.
Wait, do you want me to stop?
Yeah, you can stop, and then I'll screen share my. All right, can everyone see this? Assuming you guys can. Okay, so I'm going to be kind of discussing fields in cybersecurity, what people actually do for a living, and like all the things that Rodwin mentioned. How do people work to stop those kinds of things from happening? So there, like I guess four different. I think the way I categorize them, types of cybersecurity. They kind of fall into the defensive and offensive side of things. So preventative cybersecurity. Preventative cybersecurity is things like securing servers and building methods to minimize the risk of a cyber attack. So it's basically securing everything you do before anything actually ever happens, right? Because you don't want to actually start securing things after you already attacked, right? We want to make sure that never happens. And so that's what sysadmins are for, right? So sysadmins are your people who work with servers. They set them up, they secure them, they make sure that they follow all company guidelines with security and just setting up systems in general, right? Cyber systems is essentially the same thing, where people work together to figure out how are these like systems and networks in your server in your company interconnected, how can we secure them, and how should we engineer them to be more secure. Networking. So networking is basically the network of your of your company. How are all your servers interconnected? How are things going to work in a production environment? And what attack vectors are available, right? So a lot of things right, attackers do is that attackers don't get into everything at once, right? They usually get in through something that was neglected, right? So maybe there like we talked about phishing yesterday, right? What if you're that one person who clicked on a phishing email and they get into your network, but you don't notice, right? They exploited a small vuln in your, let's say, file server, right? And they're just sitting there. From there, they can move to other places, right? They can move to other servers, move to web servers, move to, I don't know, your databases, right? And before you know it, they've basically gone everywhere. And that's the issue. So networking is about figuring out what attack vectors are available and how attackers can move and like lateral movement across a network. And in cryptography, you've probably heard about this, right? So it's making sure that things and data is secure when transferred. So for example, passwords, right? Every company, when they take your passwords and you have accounts, they aren't kept in plain text, obviously, right? They're hashed, they're encrypted in a way that they can't be reversed. And so like the point is that if someone gets in or someone manages to view, I don't know, network traffic or something, they can't read what's going on, and that's what cryptography is for. And then detection and reaction. So detection and reaction involves building methods and plans to detect and respond to live cyber attacks. This is usually referred to as incident response. So usually most companies will have a team or a few teams called IR teams or incident response teams that will respond to live cyber attacks. Like, you detect that something's going wrong and you have a team ready to respond to attacks, shut down servers where they're needed, kick attackers out, things like that. And in the end, they would produce a report. And usually what incident response reports include are things like what better can be done next time, what damage was, things like that. Let me look at chat to see if there's anything there. All right, so offensive. So offensive is the approach to a company cybersecurity through offensive means, through the use of ethical hacking, right? So basically hacking your company's software, your company's servers, your company's networks to find vulnerabilities before people who actually have malicious intent actually do it before you. So this usually involves penetration testing, and penetration testing looks different everywhere, right? So obviously you're going to have some like base penetration testers for companies that have large networks, right? People who have pen tested networks, pen tested servers, right? There are also a lot of different specializations, like specifically hacking web applications and specifically hacking like mobile phones, right? And then digital forensics. So digital forensics is collecting, preserving, and analyzing digital evidence in order to help with vulnerability mitigation or cybercrime investigations, right? So what does this mean? It basically means that, let's say after an attack, right, your cyber operations team or your incident response team is done, your digital forensic field will go in there and check out what happened, right? Like they're gonna try to get as much as information that any attackers left behind, any malicious actor with malicious intent left behind, right? And try to figure out, piece together what happened. And this could either help your sysadmins or your infrastructure managers with figuring out what can be done better next time, or this is even often used in cybercrime investigations, such as say you had someone doing something illegal, right? And the police get a hold of their computer. Digital forensics teams will go in there, check out their computer, see what they were searching up, see what files they had saved, what files they even deleted, and they can use all of this for evidence in court and for cybercrime. So again, more about digital forensics, which is kind of what we're going to be teaching you in next week, a few basics about it. So again, it's modern day version of forensic science, recovery and investigation of material found in digital devices, right? So crime scene investigations. And so there's kind of just a kind of a baseline process, right, from secure reading. So, identification, preservation, collection, examination, analysis, interpretation, documentation, and evidence presentation, right? So stuff like this, like these 3 steps are actually getting the data. So, getting your hard drive off of the malicious person system, or, this person who's going to be tried for prison, right? And then these 3, examination and analysis, or specifically 4 and 5, examination analysis, actually checking the data to see what's there, pulling out forensic evidence, things like text messages, emails, search history, right? And then documentation interpretation. So interpretation is, what do these mean? How do they help us figure out what this person was doing? If they were searching up something, what does that mean, right? If they were emailing this person, how could this person have a connection to this overall crime, right? And documentation is just writing all of this down, writing down your interpretation of what you found and what you actually did find. And then your evidence presentation is what someone would do in court. So they would explain, this is what they found, this is what I found, this is what we think it means. These are people who we think are connected to this overall crime. And then information security. So you probably hear this word thrown around a lot. And so what it kind of basically means is protecting information by mitigating information risks. So again, it's just securing, making sure that all of our data and information is kept safe, right? We don't want people who aren't supposed to have access to your data to have access to it. All right, Ellen has a poll, I think.
I'll launch a quick poll right now again. And this one's a quick recap, just to make sure you understood some of the concepts that were just taught. So yeah, feel free to answer this. Okay, we'll give a few minutes for you guys to get your votes in, and there's not really any like penalty for getting things wrong. So this is just a little check for understanding. Yeah, we'll go over this on the next slide as well. All right, looks like about half of you guys have answered, so we can give a few more seconds for everyone else to answer it. Okay, let's give 15 more seconds. That's pretty interesting. Okay, 10 more seconds if you haven't answered yet. Okay, cool. I guess we can talk about it now. So these were the results.
Okay, so I think there's a typo on this slide, but it should be all but option C. So penetration testing is the only thing that's not really defensive security. So again, networking, right? Networking is making sure your networks are secure, figuring out attack vectors, figuring out where people can pivot from. Sysadmins, protecting your servers and stuff before anything even happens. Penetration testing is obviously not defensive cybersecurity. However, I mean, the effects of it can be applied in a defensive way, right? So people testing your software and your apps to see if they are secure, if they can be hacked into, and telling you what's vulnerable with them so that your software developers and your cybersecurity experts can fix them. Cryptography, making sure your data is safe and being transferred. And cyber systems, again, figuring out how to engineer these systems so that they can remain secure. And in digital forensics, so A and C are the correct answers. Recovering material found in digital devices and modern day version of forensic science. Obviously, again, we went over what ethical hacking is, right? It's not doesn't have much to do with forensics. So certifications and paths, right? So a lot of cybersecurity professionals certify and prove their knowledge through certifications. And there's quite a few number of certifications, and some are more popular and carry more weight than others. Usually, companies will pay for their employees to complete these courses and gain these certifications. But what a lot of people do is that they gain these certifications while they're still in college or right when they come out of it. So then it's easier for them to get a job. And so some of the most popular certifications you may have heard of are the OSCP, the CISSP, and the CompTIA Security Plus. So here's actually an example of paths laid out through certification. So let me open this new tab. This doesn't want to load. Okay, here it is. So you can see here that this is SANS roadmap. So what this is that basically telling what someone who would want to start in cybersecurity and get a job paths to go down. So you can see how people there's around 3 or 4 different paths it branches into, right? Everybody starts into like the introduction of cybersecurity. This is how most roadmaps work, with a basic introduction to networking and internet protocols. And then people either will move into their specialty, right? So some people will want to go into management, managing people, managing threats, right? Managing teams. Some people will go into monitoring and detection, so more defensive based, more incident response based. And then some people will go into penetration testing, right? Where people are assessing vulnerabilities and checking networks to see what's wrong with them. So, like for example, someone could go down this route. They, do this intro to cyber. They go through, and let's say they want to go into penetration testing, right? They go through this course, hacker tools, techniques, and exploits. They move into, let's say they want, usually most people go for network penetration testing, ethical hacking, which is kind of what the OSCP is as well. And then from there, they could specialize in web application, cloud penetration, mobile device security, advanced penetration testing, building exploits with Python, and then they could move into other things, right? Like working with binaries or working with networks and Wi-Fi, right? And so there's a lot of different specializations in cybersecurity, and no one knows everything, right? So you're never going to find someone who knows everything about every single thing. There's just way too much to know, and so that's why there's a lot of people needed to fill these different fields and specializations. And as you can see, the demand for cybersecurity rules is just going straight up because everything is more interconnected than ever, and we need people who are willing to secure and and have the skills to secure these devices. And if you've ever heard of the term of cyber warfare, right? Cyber warfare, people literally fighting wars on cyberspace level. If you've ever heard of Stuxnet, right? Stuxnet was a virus from quite a while ago, but it was regarded as like the first computer virus that could actually affect things in the real world. And so what I believe happened was this was a virus developed by the United States and Israel. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that's what happened. And it was used to disable nuclear reactors in the Middle East, and it was the first time a computer virus could affect things in the real world, and now that's just becoming more common, right? And what will happen eventually is that attackers will have the ability to shut down power grids for entire nations, shut down water supplies and critical infrastructure, and that can lead to pretty bad consequences. So that's why we need people like you guys who are willing to learn and secure these servers, companies, and critical infrastructure. And so, yeah, we're going to be moving on to our speaker. Ellen, do you want to introduce her?
Oh yeah, so she'll be speaking at 3:30, so near the end of the class. But yeah, I can first introduce her topic, and then when she comes, I'll just give a brief intro again on more of her background. But yeah, she'll be talking about threat modeling with artificial intelligence and machine learning. And Akshay and Radwan both talked a lot about the trends and like how our world is becoming more technologized, and as it does so, a lot of new technologies such as artificial intelligence and machine learning will also have to be embedded with cybersecurity, because with anything that's technology related, everyone has to be able to use it in a way that's secure. So yeah, she'll be giving a talk on threat modeling for AI and ML. And she is also the ex-cybersecurity field CTO of Microsoft and the co-founder and CTO of Security Curve. So she's an amazing person in cybersecurity, and she's going to be talking about that here at the end. Also, I see a question in the chat. Oh, sorry, Akshay, go ahead.
Yeah, so right now we're going to be switching to the Azure Labs presenting by Audit. But yeah, Ellen, you can answer that question.
Yeah, so Nisa asked a really great question, and she said, what would be a basic certification for a newcomer?
So a basic certification, I would say you would start with I guess CompTIA IT fundamentals, which, as Ellen did say, a lot of us are certified here, and that basically is just basic computer knowledge, right? And a lot of people, when they start getting into cyber, they will start with the OSCP, and the OSCP is a really famous and widely popular certification that a lot of newly cyber I guess experts or cyber people who want to work in the field will take. It's basically an offensive class where you learn about all the basics of cybersecurity using tools like Linux and Kali Linux, and you get to learn a lot about different network protocols, and eventually you do take a test to take the certification.
Yeah, great question. If you have any other questions, or if anyone else wants to put that in the chat, feel free to do so as well. But yeah, like Akshay said, we'll be moving on into actually studying in Azure now.
All right, yeah, so let's start with Microsoft Azure Labs. So let me screen share. All right, and then let me put in the chat the link to register. So if you guys click on this link, you'll be able to register into our Microsoft Labs or register into it. So basically this will help you get a virtual machine in the cloud to connect and test out these cool new tools we'll be teaching you next week and the following week. And you can also use this in the CTF challenge. So I'll be teaching about the Windows portion, and then Akshay will talk about Chromebook, and then we'll also talk about MacBook by Safin. So first I want to start the machine, and it'll take some time, but basically you first install a RDP file. So if I, hold on, let me share my whole screen.
Yeah, feel free to let us know if anything goes by fast or you're having trouble with one specific step, because you'll need to use this for the capture the flag challenges. So there are a lot of digital forensics challenges that you'll be doing at the end of this program. So utilizing all of your skills. So if you ever get stuck, feel free to let us know and we'd be happy to.
Yeah. So for Windows, if you click on the remote desktop and go to the Windows key and then type in remote desktop, you should get this right here. Then if you click open RDP file, and then I have my RDP file right here, and you should be able to click connect. And the way I got this RDP file was by going to my labs.azure.com/virtual machines, and you would be redirected here after registering using the link in the chat. You can click right here, or let me click, oops, let me let the machine start. But you should be able to click this computer button and it will automatically install an RDP file into your system. So wait.
Yeah, while we're waiting for that, we'll probably wait a few minutes as well for everyone to get registered. Someone asked if you have to create an account, and I believe they do, right? If they don't already
Yeah,
have
you would have to create a Microsoft account. You can just use your email and it'll tell you all the steps to, well, you just have to put your email and maybe your name as well. Are there any other questions coming up while this is booting up?
I guess, do you also want to explain like how this works or what exactly they're doing with Azure?
Yeah, so basically we have cool tools that are installed into the Azure Lab. And Azure Lab is basically a Windows machine in the cloud, which you're connecting remotely to. And basically it's a brand new Windows VM or a virtual machine that you can use in the capture the flag challenges. And basically you don't have to use any on your own personal laptop. It's all on there. Yeah. Another question. So you should, when you sign in, you see the ETF, you should click on the right here. So this, and you should start the machine. So right now mine just booted up and I can click this right here and you can see a file just got installed. So now when I go back to my here and click connect, so I open the RDB file by clicking there and then connect, it should give me this prompt. And then the password is capital E TFSD123, and I can also put that in the chat. The chat. Or can someone put that, one of the instructors put that in the chat, the password for all the labs?
Yeah, I'll check out. Yeah.
And wait, can you guys see my Windows machine? It's loading.
Yep.
Cool. And here, boom, I'm inside the VM. And this is not my personal laptop, but this is actually the VM used by Microsoft. So that's the gist for how to use Windows. Does anyone have any questions on how to get the Windows one started?
Okay, yeah, I think it's still starting for some people, so I guess we can wait a few more minutes and also launch a poll in a few minutes to see where you guys are at in terms of
Yeah.
the skills.
Yeah, it's going to take a few minutes to start up, but after that you can use it for, and we've given each person about 2 hours of use just for just practicing and playing around with it. And then later on for the CTF, you'll get a lot more time to use it and use the lab and help you with the challenges.
Someone asked in the chat, what do we enter for computer name?
So let's just do this one more time. So if you went to the remote desktop connection, you don't need to put computer name. You just have to open the RDP file. So if I go here, downloads, ETF final RDP, and then you just have to click connect. It should automatically put into the computer name and username. It should automatically fill those fields for you. And then when you can click connect. Does anyone else have questions?
Someone said they're still a little confused after signing in.
So, wait, hold on. So they're probably at this stage, if you're at the labs.azure.com/virtual machines website, and you should see this box right here. If you click this right here, it should say starting, and that will start your machine. And after it's loaded up, which will probably take 2 to 3 minutes, it should say running. Then you want to click this computer icon, which says connect to the virtual machine. So right here, it says download, and you can easily click open or save the file. So I clicked open right here, and it should automatically get you to this remote desktop connection place. If you have more questions, we can also go in breakout rooms, and then you guys can also share your screen in there.
Keep in mind that this process that Ardit's doing won't work if you're on your MacBook or Chromebook.
Yeah, this is only for the Windows. Safin will show you how to do the MacBook, and Akshay will show you how to do Chromebook.
Someone also asked, what are we doing once we are on the machine?
So this is just for testing to see that you're able to connect to the machine. And if you are, that's great. You can also just play around. We have some tools there, but we'll be teaching those tools next week and the third and fourth workshops.
Okay, I'll launch a poll right now to see where everyone is at. If you're on a Mac or Chromebook, you don't have to answer this one. I guess it's just gonna be. Okay, so the poll should be launched. Feel free to answer so we know where you guys are at. Okay, so it looks like people so far, most people have been able to get into the VM, and then some people are signed in but waiting for the VM to start. So yeah, that might take a few minutes. And then a few others are stuck at the remote desktop step, and around 2 people are still setting the Microsoft. Okay, let me.
Yeah,
I
if you
guess-
guys want to, if you want to private message me or just put it in the chat, what's your error that you're getting or for trying to connect to the RDP. And then also, once you're done, try to shut down your machine because we've limited only to 2 hours. So like right now, mine's stopping. And we've also made it so after like 15 minutes of idleness, it'll automatically shut down. I think we can. Do you want to switch to MacBook now or?
I guess we can wait a few more minutes, maybe until like 2:50, just to allow anyone who has any lingering questions. But yeah, we can definitely move on after that. So I guess make sure if you have any questions, try to ask it now while we're still on Windows.
Yeah.
Okay, feel free to private message us if you're stuck at a step. Also, we can probably, if you have any questions after as well, you can feel free to email. But yeah, some of the steps, like the starting the VM, might take some time, so don't worry if it does take a few minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll be going over Mac next. So thanks for being patient if you're on a different. Also, if you have already connected, this was just like a test, so you can feel free to just like click around and then disconnect afterwards.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we can move on if no one has any final questions. You can continue to private message us questions or put it in the chat as well. Okay, thanks, got it.
Yeah. Musafin, you're next.
Yeah. Give me a second here. Let me get screen sharing up. Okay, so you guys can all see my screen, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll just put this into present mode so it's a little bit easier to see for a sec. But yeah, Mac instructions. So once you've basically gone over everything that Audit has and you've downloaded your RDP file, you need to install Microsoft Remote Desktop on your Mac. So the way you'll do that is go to the App Store and just search for it. And it should be the first result and it'll look like this. There'll be a download button right here where it says open for me because I've already downloaded it. And then if you don't have an administrator account on your computer, you might need to ask your parents to put in their password or something. But once that's downloaded, all you need to do is open the app, and I'll show you what you need to click to open up the file. So if you just go here, so I have the app open, and all you need to do is, well, actually, I just have the RDP file right here on my desktop, so it'll automatically be associated with this app. So if you just double click this, and you hit continue and enter the password, you should be able to get into your remote PC. So yeah, that's basically all you need to do for Mac. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Hopefully that wasn't too fast, but yeah, it's really simple and you can just do whatever you want once you're in the box. It's basically like a Windows computer. So yeah, you can just treat it like a completely different computer. But yeah, and then if you want to exit out, of course, all you need to do is click the X button. Yeah. Do you guys have any questions? I'll open up the chat, or if anyone wants to unmute, feel free to do that.
I'll launch the poll again for all Mac users in a few minutes. But yeah, feel free to ask any questions or let us know where you can. Or even if you want like Falcon to review anything. Yeah, sure.
Sorry, what did you say?
Oh, I was just saying if they wanted to like you to review everything, anything again, they can also ask.
Oh yeah. Let me know in the chat, and I can.
Someone asked, is the password the computer's password?
Audit, do you want to answer that?
So it should ask you for a password, and that was given in the chat. It's capital E and then ETFSD123.
Someone also asked, Savin, can you review the steps for Mac again? I guess just one more time. And then maybe like a bit slower so people can follow.
Yeah, so the first thing you need to do is open the App Store. So to do that, you can just hit Command Space, or you can go to your Launchpad and search for it. But if you just type App Store and hit Enter, it'll pop up. And then all you need to do is go to the search bar in the top left. Oops. Yeah, there you go. You know what? I'll just zoom out. This is going to be more confusing than it has to be. So all you need to do is type in the thing in the search bar, hit open. Here, I'll go here and do it for you guys. So what's it called again? Microsoft Remote Desktop. Microsoft. And I have the most updated version of macOS, so it might look a little bit different for you guys, but the process should be the exact same. So yeah, just type that in the search bar, hit enter, and then click the app. And then it'll show a download button here. For me, I've already downloaded it, like I said, so I can just hit open. And yeah, and then all you need to do is double click this file. And yeah, if you want, you can also hit this and then do import from RDP file. And yeah, it does the same thing. Yeah. Does anybody have any questions still? I'll look at the chat actually. How do I download the RDP file?
Yeah, so that was, let me screen share that. Do you want me to show that again then? On how to
Yeah, go.
download the RDP file?
Mhm.
So wait. So right here, once you get to this page and register, you should click this right here. Click connect to the virtual machine, and it should automatically install it for your, it should automatically install it into your machine, to your laptop. And yeah. Do you have any other questions for MacBook, or do you want to go next to Chromebook?
Let me launch the poll real quick, and then we can. Okay, I just relaunched it, so if you're on a Mac right now, feel free to let us know. And this should be all anonymous, so we don't have to worry. You can just feel free to share with us which step you're in. If you're on a Windows, feel free to just ignore this poll. Or a Chromebook. Okay, so it looks like most people were able to get in. Some people are just waiting for the VM to start. And then a few people are setting up their Microsoft account or are stuck at the RDP step. Okay, if you're stuck at the RDP step, or you have any questions, if you're on one of the other first three steps, feel free to let us know.
And if you're having this problem later on, you guys can talk in the Discord. We made a channel, I think, called Tech Support for this.
Yep, yeah, all the instructors and like everyone on the team is in the Discord, and we always check it. So yeah, feel free to put things in the Discord after the class as well. Oh yeah, I'll actually just send the invite link. So you can feel free to join. Someone asked, what will the VM be used for? That's a good question.
So the VM will have some challenges for the CTF challenge, and then also some tools that are needed for the CTF challenge. And basically, it's just a box. So basically, like another computer, essentially. And it's mostly for just not to use your own personal laptop, but to use that, so nothing happens to your own computer. And some people might have different laptops, different hardware. So it's just everyone will have the same stuff to use.
You'll also get to use the Azure Lab during presentation, so you can follow along with us.
Yeah.
So you can think of it kind of like a second, like virtual computer, and you can feel free to like use it for any of our lessons or challenges. Okay, think we can wait a few more minutes for all the Mac users, and please let us know if there are any troubles because this is pretty important for the CTL. So we really want to make sure that everyone is able to get theirs here.
right, should I go over Chromebook now?
Someone asked, wait, real quick, I think someone said, what do we do after we download the app? Safa, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, so all you need to do is hit the open button, like I said, or open it via Launchpad or use Command Space, and then just type Microsoft Remote Desktop, and then just double click the RDP file or import it like I showed. Or do you want me to reshare my screen and show it again?
For the person who asked that question, if you want Safa to demonstrate it, let us know as well.
I just
Okay,
put
yeah.
a link to the instructions if you guys want to check it out yourselves, because it can be kind of confusing when we're just talking about it. So
And yeah, Safin, they would like you to go over it again, just like real quickly.
Get it ready again.
Also for Windows and Chromebook people, we'll be going over Chromebook after, and then please just be patient if you've already finished it up, and you can feel free to click around, but stay in the Zoom so we have our speaker event directly after we're done.
I'm gonna assume you, or actually, could you type in the chat or whatever, however you were communicating, if you were having trouble opening the app, or just what to do after you open the app? Whoever had the question.
They said they opened it, so I guess after they opened it.
Yeah, so all you need to do is just double click the RDP file wherever that is, and then it'll open up for you. In fact, you don't even need the app open, the double click will open it for you. And then enter the password, etfsd123, exclamation, or not exclamation. Then continue. So yeah. Was that good, or do you want me to expand on a specific step?
Oh, they said they got it. Okay.
Okay, cool.
And then one last question. Someone asked, what do I do after I am on the ETF final? They want Windows.
What do you do after you're on the machine?
I think after they download the RDP, I guess, do you also clarify in the chat?
Okay, if this is a Windows question, I'm gonna let Audit answer it.
Yeah, I couldn't hear. Wait, what was the problem?
They said, what do I do after I'm on the ETF final page?
Oh,
I
okay.
like that, Azure.
I think, yeah, let me just share screen again.
Okay.
So after you're here, you would just click the connect to the virtual machine and then click open, or go to your file explorer and then double click on it, and it should automatically open to this screen, and you can click connect and then put in your password. Does that answer your question? Yeah. I think we should switch to the Chromebook now, because we have.
I think everyone should be good, but if you have any other questions, yeah, feel free to let us know.
yeah, okay, so I'll screen share from my second laptop and then show you how to use the Chromebook to connect. All right, so basically what you have to do is go to the Chromebook instructions. So your Chromebook's gonna have a left circle on the bottom left, and then I have a circle on the bottom left. You're gonna click on that, and then you're gonna go to the Chromebook App Store. After opening the Play Store, you would search for Microsoft Remote Desktop. And then once you install the app, you're gonna open your Folders app, and you're gonna navigate to wherever your RDP file is that you downloaded, and then right-click on the file, and then open it with Remote Desktop. So let me show you how to do that here. So you would come here, right? You'd search for App Store. I have Play Store right here, but you would just search Play Store, open that, and then you can search for Microsoft. So if I search for Microsoft Remote Desktop, I already searched it up, so you would get this. I already have it installed, so it just says open, but for you, it would stay install. After installing it, and I'm assuming you've downloaded the RDP file already after logging in, you would go to wherever your file is located. It's probably located in downloads for you. You can right click on it and then open with RD client. And so RD client is your remote desktop client. And then put in the password. So the password is etfsd123. And then, yeah, now we're on the Windows machine. And so from here, I can, open Firefox or whatever and use the programs. So does anyone have any question? Let me check the chat.
I think someone put in the chat that they can't find that.
Can't find what? Oh, find the app? Okay. On the Play Store. So were you able to get on the Play Store first of all? Okay, so if you go on Play Store, then did you search Microsoft Remote Desktop in the top? Okay, and you didn't find this Remote Desktop app. Let me see. Can I get a link or can I share this? You don't see it either. Okay, that's weird. Remote desktop. So, do you see this one? This is a different one, I think, but it does essentially the same thing. Or is there nothing that looks like that? Also, for whoever said it keeps saying unable to connect, that's most likely because the VM is still starting, or you haven't started the VM.
Yeah, so just go to that link labs.azure.com and then click that the place where it says click to start machine, and it should say starting. And once it says running, then that's when you know you can start connecting to it.
Yeah, so if you did search it, you should have been able to find it. And you can probably Google for it too, I guess. If you have, probably Google for it. If I searched up remote desktop, you should be able to. You might be able to access it from here. So if you went to play.google.com.
Yeah, actually, someone has a question. They said, I got the app and now I have a white screen that says connect to PCs and workspaces.
Oh, okay. So you have if I left this if I exit out of this and I went back to remote desktop client, right? So this is probably what it looks like. What you do is you exit out and you did you download your RDP file? And assuming you did download your RDP file, you would have to find it in your file system. So you open the Files app, if you can search for it, and then ETF file RDP. The password is, I can put in chat again.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah, so that's the password, and then once you find the file, you right click, open with RD client, and it'll start connecting you.
Ellie, I think you can put the poll up for the Chromebook users.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay, yeah, if you're on a Chromebook, feel free to enter this. I think only 2 people have Chromebooks. Or maybe 3. Yeah. Or maybe 1, I do. Yeah, only for people with Chromebooks.
For the people stuck at the RDP setup step, can you put in the chat or unmute and tell us what your error is or problem?
Also, if you don't feel comfortable doing it here, just let Ellen know and we can set up a breakout room for you.
Yeah. The goal is by the end of today's class, we should have everyone able to connect and get into the room. Someone said they never got a prompt to get RDP. Oh, okay. Okay, let us know if you have any questions or if you're stuck and you want to share your screen in like a breakout room. We can also set up a few breakout rooms with instructors as well. Okay, someone also said their RDP is unable to connect. The person who asked this, are you on Windows? Mac. Okay. Yeah, so they're unable to connect on Mac.
Did you start the RDP or did you start the VM on the Microsoft page or the Azure page? If you're in already, you can do whatever you want. Just make sure you are able to connect to it.
For everyone who's already done, I'm going to just launch a few quick questions reviewing the content. Since like our speaker event will start soon, but I know a lot of people were able to get it set up. So if you're not, if you're still working on it, don't worry at all. But for those who have been able to set it up, I'll also just launch a few questions. Someone else is asking, the message is, okay, I'll just send the message. Okay.
Okay, so if your issue is that make sure the PC is turned on, connected to the network, you have to turn on the PC through your lab page, and it will take about, at most, it'll take 10 or maybe 7 minutes to for the VM to actually start up, because yeah, when it's kind of a heavy operating system. So. And if you keep getting an issue, try closing out of your remote desktop app and reopening the RDP file, because I had the issue once when I was testing it yesterday.
Okay, also I have breakout rooms, so if anyone wants help like within breakout rooms, okay, also I just launched a review question if you're already done and just want to review something. So feel free to answer that. But if you're still working, keep on asking us questions because we really want to make sure everyone's able to connect. Okay, so it looks like for everyone who did answer the poll, there's 2 answers that are in the lead. Actually, one's going. Our speaker also should be here in 15 minutes. So if you have any last questions before the speaker ends. Someone also asked on the app settings, I don't see import from RDP file. I guess it's for
Wait, which machine are they on? Like Chromebook or what?
I guess whoever asked that, can you like just DM me which machine you're on as well? Also, someone else wants to go to breakout room, so. The person who said import from RDP file was on Windows.
Oh, wait. So their problem is they have the RDP file, but they can't import it.
When you open RDP normally, it won't show it. You have to like click the down arrow, and then there should be an option.
Or if you go to your file explorer and just double click on that RDP file, it should automatically open it for you.
All right, so for the poll answer, the right answer was $8 billion. So most of you guys got that correct. Yeah, so the average cost, or not the average cost, but there was $8 billion in cost to businesses due to. Okay, we might have time to launch another one, but I know some people are still working, so if you are, don't worry about it. But the speaker says she'll also be here. Okay, here's another review question about digital forensics. Okay, the speaker should be here in about 5 minutes, so I'll also launch the poll for year one last time for everyone to answer, just to see how many people were able to get. Okay, great. So yeah, most people got this right, which is not usually true by digital forensics. It usually doesn't involve ethical hacking encryption. If you remember about digital forensics, the first is like the definition, so collecting, preserving, and analyzing digital evidence in order to help vulnerability mitigation or cybercrime investigations. And it also does include cybercrime and cyber laws. So Akshay talked a lot about how a lot of times digital forensics is used to recover evidence from like malicious actors or from like devices, and then that can also be used and brought to a court case. So it's used a lot within cybercrime, cyber laws. And then, yeah, it doesn't usually involve ethical hacking and encryption. If anything, it would involve decryption. So I'm not sure why you want to. So yeah, most of you guys got that one right. I think some of the instructors are still helping people in breakout rooms. So we can wait another minute. And then in the meanwhile, for everyone here, I'll launch the poll again just to see like a final check to see where everyone's at with this year. Okay, so everyone, not so like Windows, Mac or Chromebook could just answer one last time, and then we can just do a final check to see if all of you guys are able to access the VM. Okay, so it looks like most people were able to connect and get to VM, which is awesome. After you get in, you don't really have to do anything else. You can click around and just see how the environment's like, but otherwise you're good to go and you're ready for the challenges later on. A few people are signed in but waiting for the VM to start. If it still doesn't start, like after a long time, feel free to like text in the Discord or like the chat, or even email us if you want to. I mean, one person is stuck at RDP setup. So yeah, if you're stuck at RDP, you should probably ask one of our instructors. Okay, cool. Thanks for answering the polls. Okay, let me screen share with the speaker intro, and she should be here in a few minutes, so we can get started with her. Okay, let me know if you can see my screen.
We can.
Okay, perfect. All right, so let me get co-host. All right, hi.
Hi,
So
how are you?
doing well. How are you?
Good. Good to see you.
Awesome. Yeah, we're super excited to get this talk going. But yeah, for all the students here, this is Miss Diana Kelly. And just for a quick intro, I know I've already talked a lot about all of her experience in cybersecurity and the topic that she's going to be talking about today. Just as a brief introduction, Ms. Diana Kelly is the ex-cybersecurity field CTO of Microsoft, and she's also the co-founder and CTO of Security Curve. She has over 30 years of experience with careers in security, and some of her previous roles also has included the Global Executive Security Advisor at IBM Security, and multiple other experiences that just adds on to her experience in cybersecurity. And she was also named one of Cybersecurity Venture's 100 Fascinating Females Fighting Cybercrime. So today she'll be talking about threat modeling for artificial intelligence and machine learning. So welcome.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Can I ask questions? Is it okay if I start with asking a couple questions?
Yeah, for sure. I'll stop screen sharing it as well. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just curious, how many people here know about threat modeling or have done any threat modeling? Just raise your hands, or anyone? Okay, so maybe not. Okay, so that's helpful. How about anybody who's looked at AI and machine learning yet? Anyone done any research or even just if it's initial research, just curious. No.
If you guys can either type in the chat or raise your hands.
Okay, good. So we got some people who've looked at AI and ML. Great. All right, that's really helpful. So, okay. So with that, I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen so that we can see the slides. Okay, does that look good to everybody?
Yep, looks perfect.
Okay, got it on single page so I can go back and forth. Good. All right, so this is actually part of a longer talk that I have. I'm going to give you the condensed version of it. Excuse me. Yeah, give you the condensed version of it. Wow, sorry. So we can fit it in the time that we have. But I also have a lot of references to original research, primary research that you can go and you can review afterwards. So I'm hoping that you'll get kind of excited about both the concept of threat modeling and also the concepts around threat modeling for AI and ML. So first of all, if you haven't done threat modeling before, I'm going to do a little bit of background on why we should threat model at all and why it's a little bit different for AI and ML. Wow, I'm so sorry. And then we'll talk about what can go wrong in AI and ML, and then talk about how we actually can do the threat modeling for it. So just to get a little bit of background on threat modeling is something that we do in security. It used to be known as wow, as risk assessment or risk analysis. Risk analytics, I'm just gonna stop. Okay, hopefully it's gonna take care of it for now. But anyway, so threat modeling is done because we want to understand what can go wrong with something. So if you don't threat model or you don't do risk assessment before you launch something, it's very easy for something to fail in a way that may be really unexpected. Most of the time when people are designing something, so even think about a car, for example. When you're designing a car, you think about how that car is going to be working when people are using it under the right circumstances. So that would include things like you're going down the road at a certain speed, and that road is designed for people to drive at a certain speed. If you live in an area that has a lot of like really windy roads with twisty turns, you may notice that the speed limit's much lower there than if you're on a really nice highway. So as you're looking at creating a car and understanding the threat model of a car, you would want to take into account what could go wrong. So if it's snowy, if there are bald tires, for example, if it's a really windy road, you have to take into account these different things that are going to impact the potential safety of that car. And then when you start threat modeling, you can say, well, somebody could skid, for example, if they're going at a too fast or too slow. So you start saying, well, how can we mitigate that threat or that risk related to driving the car quickly? And you can do things like you could have signs that say how fast it is to go, how that's a type of threat mitigation. You can also do things like you can put brakes into a car, you put airbags into a car, you put seat belts. So these are all these kinds of aspects that you work into the car itself to make it safer under all kinds of circumstances. And as you probably noticed, as I was mentioning some of the things that could go wrong, none of those are outright attacks. And oftentimes when you're thinking about cybersecurity, it's always, who's the bad guy? Is Mr. Robot getting us? Is this a nation state that's attacking us? But to actually build a resilient system in cybersecurity, you need to think of all the misuse cases. And that would be both intentional and unintentional failure modes. So if somebody's trying to attack it. So then if you get into threat modeling of, let's go back to our car, somebody trying to attack the car, that would be someone who might be riding beside you and hits you. You know, they angle your car into there, someone who cuts the brakes on purpose. So those are actually very intentional attacks, but things can go wrong unintentionally too. So as you threat model any new system, it's really important to remember both looking at what can go wrong intentionally and unintentionally. But threat modeling for AI and ML is even a little bit different than regular threat modeling in things like software or networks. And if you've worked on any software, anybody here done any development, you may have been really focused on, I want it to do this. And when a user clicks here, I want it to behave in a specific way. So you start to really think about the functionality, and QA is very much focused in software on, is it behaving as expected under normal use? Threat modeling or risk analysis is it still going to behave as expected, or how will it fail if it's being misused? So race conditions are a good example in software. So with, if you're using it at a normal speed, the software reacts in a certain way. What if you start really hammering on the keyboard and you start just putting a whole lot of input into the software? And then you can even take that out to not just speed, but also what if people are trying to do brute force with things like fuzzing? So you just throw a whole bunch of data at the software to see if it's responding the way it's supposed to. So threat modeling is fairly well known, both in the software and the networking field, but threat modeling is a little bit different or newer in machine learning and AI, because both machine learning and AI are newer to the technology field. It's not that they haven't been around for a long time, but the way that they've been used and how they're being used is really picking up a lot of speed. So in order to use these responsibly, we need to understand how to threat model for them. So what's different about ML and AI for someone who's been doing threat modeling for a long time? And there are a number of actually really interesting cases where it's quite different from what we've been thinking about for use in software or networks. And one of the first ones that's really important is trust. We tend to believe what comes out of a computer. And I'm not just saying that, you tend to, if somebody posts something on Reddit, you may be, and it sounds very outrageous, you may be like, yeah, I don't know if I believe that. Or there's a TikTok that says that, oh, I can fly, right? You'd probably have some level of a little bit of hey, I don't know if that's true or not. But what if you enter something into your calculator? If you enter two really big numbers and you multiply them in the calculator, are you going to then go by hand, redo that calculation? Or do you just assume that that calculator has done it properly? You probably assume that it's done it properly. And actually, for most of us, calculators are actually better at doing large complex calculations than humans are, unless you're a real savant at that. So we tend to trust what comes out of the computer. And in the case of calculations, for the most part, it's pretty much right. It's not always. There's a very famous incident from way, way long ago called the floating point calculation error, where on certain pieces of hardware, if you were doing calculations within Excel, it was doing the calculations improperly. So you can have incidents, you can have situations where just running software on different hardware may give you different outcomes. So just blindly trusting what the outcome is, not always great, but in general, most of the time, most of the calculators that we use, most of the calculations that we're doing, we can trust those. Well, in AI and ML, we're using and we're trusting our systems in a very different way. So an example is with radiograph reading. So a lot of oncologists, cancer doctors, are using some forms of ML to help them to better identify if a radiograph or an X-ray is indicative of someone with cancer or not, or with something without cancer. So if you're using this and it's saying, yes, this patient has cancer, it doesn't have cancer, and you're trusting it implicitly, and the doctor says, well, I'm going to trust this. This must be right. It's a machine. They've got this right. Then you've got a little bit more impact that can come out of believing this than maybe just getting a calculation wrong. It starts to be something that can impact somebody's life. And actually, in some cases, wrong calculations can impact people's lives too. In medicine, for example, if you give somebody too much radiation, it's the difference between helping them to get over cancer and potentially killing them. So trust, and how we trust computers and what comes out of computers, this is taking on a very different kind of model as we look at how AI and ML are being built. And I just gave you one example. There are actually a huge number of examples in the literature where you can start to see the impacts of believing what comes out of the model without questioning it. And that really touches again on, the impact and the overall risk, because if you look at what NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, has for the equation, risk is likelihood. How likely is that going to be? Is that going to occur times impact? What's the negativity? What's the fallout? What can go wrong if this is not right? And in ML and AI, again, I had mentioned that healthcare one. There's some other really impactful areas too. There's going to be a lot more as we adopt this technology. And I'm not in any way suggesting we don't adopt AI and ML. I just really want everyone to be aware that it's not always going to be perfect. Just because it's a computer that comes out with the answer, we have to question it. And I'll talk to a number of different ways that we question it. But judicially, for example, so in some jurisdictions, there are judges that are using AI, ML-based software to help them understand how long a sentence should be for an offender. And what they're using, initially what was going into those systems, some of it was actually pretty biased itself, because the US penal system is fairly biased right now. And there's really great research showing that the color of your skin can strongly impact how long you're going to be put in jail, whether you get put in jail for a specific, the same crime that somebody else with a different color skin is going to go in for. So if we take that biased data of what's in the current penal population and we just put that right into sentencing software, what could happen? We would be lifting and automating bias, and we'd be repeating it instead of addressing the bias. So that's a pretty big impact, because that's going to impact people's lives and people's livelihood and their ability maybe later to get jobs. So impacts in AI and ML, again, there's some really potentially large impacts. So getting this right, getting threat modeling right in AI and ML is really critical. Data fuel is another big one that's different. In your software, if you're writing software, if you're testing your software, you probably need some good test data, but it may not be massive terabytes of data, petabytes of data. Machine learning needs data. You may have heard that data is the new oil, and that's in large part because of the market capitalizations of technology companies versus the old energy companies. But really, there's something to this when we get to machine learning, because in order for machine learning to learn, it needs to learn from something, and that means data. So that we're coming up with a lot of data that we're feeding into these systems. And if you've looked at big data and data lakes and the potential leakage of privacy, you may be starting to think, oh, you know what, the more data that we feed in, the more that we could be putting at risk of having this data leak out. So that's another really big thing to take into account. AI and ML may be hidden. That's another one that we always know. When you're interacting with your machines, right? Whether it's our phones or it's our laptops, right? We know it's software on the other end. We know it's hardware. But you may have interacted with an AI bot, for example, and not known if it was a person, because some of these bots they're used in customer service interactions. And I don't know about you, but I call my cable company, and I half the time can't figure out if I'm talking to a person or to a bot, because of the way that they're responding. It can be really kind of robotic to begin with. But not knowing that it's there is actually another thing to take into account for a couple of reasons. One is it could be a legal liability. If you've got somebody interacting with your AI bot, and they don't know it's an AI bot, they may say things to it that they don't want to say to a bot. They may believe what's coming out of that AI bot. So it could actually lead to some legal repercussion later on. It may also be if you don't know that you're buying something that's got a bot on the other end, you may think that you're paying for a human being that's assisting you, and really you've got something that's software. So not knowing that there's AI or an ML in a piece of software or in a system could actually be an impact too. And then the last thing that really matters that's different is that there's quite a learning curve going on. Data scientists are, and really just that whole space is exploding as a really important area within technology and learning. But data science isn't something that people had been focusing, or a lot of people had been focusing on for years and years. Now it's becoming a really explosive growth area. But security people, a lot of us are pretty new to AI and ML. And many of us, we've been practicing for a long time, but not focusing specifically on data security. So there's a level of learning curve, because in order to understand a system and to threat model it properly, you really need to know it well. So there's a learning curve as we're trying to do more AI and ML threat modeling. There's a learning curve for us in the industry. So that's why it's different. That's why it's changed. And then looking at what can go wrong. And as I had mentioned earlier about threat modeling, there's two different things and that can happen. It's either intentional. This is when the bad guys are after us, the criminals are after us, the nation state wants to go against another country, and they are actively trying to poison or circumvent a system. Unintentional happens a lot more than you might think. And that's when the system, nobody tampered with it on purpose, but the system did not behave as it was expected. So it's putting out something that's not correct. And I have here a list of integrity attacks and intentional and unintentional attacks. And there is a reference it should be in these slides, a reference to where a lot of this original research came from. And Rav Shankar is one of the data scientists at Microsoft who came up with this model of intentional failure modes and unintentional failure modes. So it's, as I said, if it's not in this version of the deck, I can give you guys the link to his work with his other fellow researchers, because it's a great paper and it's really worth reading. But so anyway, so as we look at security, we generally look at CIA. So confidentiality, integrity, and availability are the three main things that we want in security. So here are some integrity attacks that would be intentional in AI and ML. And the first one, you may have seen something about this. It's a perturbation attack. And that's when you create noise within the image to get the system to misclassify it. And there's some really good research showing that things like a bicycle to a human being, you show one picture of a bicycle, you change one little bit of a pixel, change 1 or 2 pixels in it, it still looks to us like a bicycle. But to a machine learning system algorithm, it may look like a rockhopper penguin or something completely different and unexpected. So that perturbation, if it's an intentional attack, you can really change the integrity of how that system is looking at what's coming out. So let's go back to our radiograph with the person trying to figure out if they have cancer or not. Well, if 1 or 2 pixels have been changed in there, then it would be classified differently, so that you could actually put somebody, if you knew somebody was sick with cancer, and in general, the sooner you can catch the cancer, the better. Somebody's sick with cancer, and instead of them getting an early warning, if there was an integrity attack on purpose against that, it could be, hey, everything's fine here, you don't have cancer, they really do, and that could make them sicker in the long run and potentially lead to the impact of death. Another example would be text translation. So if you've got, for example, somebody's just adding in, they're adding in noise to the translation, you could get a translation that doesn't mean something, or worse, it could mean something that wasn't intended by the speaker. So instead of me saying what I'm saying to you, it could be, me, saying, like, if it was in translation, something horrible, like, I think everybody's a jerk or something, really, or worse, but I'm not going to say anything worse. So poisoning attacks, this is another one that this is when you're training the machine learning algorithm to be able to do classification, then you could actually contaminate the model so that the classification would be off. And one kind of fun example of this was Tay. And Tay was a bot that was created by the natural language and processing team at Microsoft. And Tay's purpose was to try and understand how natural language could be learned, looking at machine learning and NLP, natural language processing. Tay, they said, well, we really want to understand how this bot is going to acquire language. So where's a good place to go that's got a really big conversation happening? Twitter. So they put Tay out on Twitter. They were completely honest about it. It was transparent. He said, this is Tay's a bot. Hi, I'm Tay, I'm a bot, and I'm going to have conversations. And until Brad Smith, who's the president, Satya Nadella is the CEO of Microsoft, but Brad Smith's the president. Until Brad Smith wrote his book last year, I didn't know that apparently Taylor Swift's legal team did actually reach out to Microsoft and say, we're not so sure we want Tay on Twitter. But before anything really got too far, Tay was gone off of Twitter. And the reason was that in 24 hours, Tay had gone from this bot they were trying to acquire natural language to, this was the training phase for Tay, to a really horrific racist, and was repeating terrible things like Hitler was right. So that's an example of contaminating the data. So how does Tay know? Tay is a bot, right? And it's just going to learn and respond. So people were like, hey, let's see if we can get Tay to learn awful, terrible things and start saying terrible things like Hitler was right. And lo and behold, that's what happened. So Microsoft removed Tay, had a conversation with the world and apologized and said, that we did not mean to offend. And it was just a really good, and the team learned a lot actually, and it helped, and Satya was very positive about, let's learn how to do this better. Let's take this as a learning experience. So I'm not bringing this up as like, oh, this is like badness per se. It's that it was a really good learning experience about how how to, train how to train the systems, and how important it is to make sure that you're training the system with the right data. At IBM, when Watson was being trained for cybersecurity, Watson was IBM's AI. Training Watson, we were looking at things like, we have to give it the right data so that when it's classifying things later, it's going to have really good outcomes. And even some things that are simple that you might not have thought about, we were realizing that it takes somebody who understands how things work and what you're trying to train on. So an example in cybersecurity is just even the term salt the hash. Right? If you hear the term salt the hash, you probably, if you haven't studied cryptography, or you don't do a lot in cryptography, you hear salt the hash and you probably think that has to do with cooking. Right? But it's also something that you do in cryptography. But how would a system like this know? They need to be trained. It needs to be understood. So this phase is really important. And poisoning the system at this phase can have really significant negative outcomes. And then also things like, reprogramming it. So that the neural nets that could give you, things like unintended queries. So an example here would be, if you're using the queries for the model, that it's doing something that it wasn't actually intended to solve. So you've got an image classifier, for example, and that classifier was to help with radiographs, or to look at something else, maybe to detect birds, or even some classifiers have been used to identify snow leopards in very white areas, snowy white areas where it's hard for human eyes to detect the snow leopards. But instead of using this classifier to do something good, like helping the snow leopard population, could be used to fake out a CAPTCHA, because CAPTCHAs very often, those are those things where they're like, you prove you're not a robot and show me everywhere there's a bicycle in this picture. So using that classifier in an unintended way. There can also be confidentiality attacks, for example. Again, these are intentional. So looking at like a backdoor machine learning. So the model has a backdoor in it, written by the developers. And this is the same that can happen in backdoor in software. It means that somebody can gain access to that system that wasn't intended. For example, in one case, like if there's a sticker on a sign, and that sticker was supposed to, for the system, for the developers, they wanted to trigger a certain kind of behavior. But if somebody finds that out and they put that sticker on that sign, they could trigger that misbehavior in the final model. And an example there would be, it's a stop sign, but you have a back door that sells that autonomous car. That's not a stop sign. That's actually a 60-mile-per-hour speed limit sign. So the car would speed up rather than stop. And then intentional one, a bad guy would put this back door into the system, so that now your autonomous car, instead of being safe the way you wrote it, your autonomous car is now dangerous and speeding up when it shouldn't. And then another example is with the exploiting the software dependencies. So the AI and ML lives in the same world, in the same computers, in the same world that all of our other software does. So that means it's actually part of this big complex chain, and it could be vulnerable to, with the dependencies, to these more classic attacks. So things like buffer overflows, for examples. And attackers are looking at all of these different angles already in software, in AI and ML. So they're already actively trying to understand how they can misuse these systems intentionally, which is why, as developers, and if anybody here gets into AI and ML and decides to be a data scientist or a data security scientist, these are the kinds of really important research that you could do to make sure that the AI and ML that people use is safe and secure and resilient. So some unintentional attacks. Because remember, it's not always intentional. Sometimes stuff just goes haywire if you haven't thought through what can go wrong. So in unintentional attacks, for example, this is kind of an interesting one, which is around reward hacking. And having in reinforcement learning systems, they learn what's good and they do more of that. And they do less of what they're not getting their reward on. And there have been some interesting things like looking at gaming, and how reward hacking and systems in gaming has gone into ways that people wouldn't, human beings don't normally expect to go. And one example, and there's the research that you can go look up later if you'd like to. But this one, in this gaming system, when the parents had children in this simulation, the children were worth a certain amount of energy. And so what the gaming system realized was that in order to get more energy, they could just have kids and start eating them, which in a game, that's logical. That's okay. Just keep having more kids and you keep eating your children. But if this was actually a system that we were asking us to tell us what's the best way to approach solving the problem, if it was eat children, that wouldn't be in the real world a good solution. Another example of reward hacking is a floor cleaning robot that gets, so trying to train, right? If you've got any kind of a Roomba or one of those robotic systems, right? Try to make those better because they can have trouble if you move the furniture, if you changed around the carpets or things. So trying to get these to be smarter and reward, reinforcement learning is one way. But in this case, the floor cleaning robot it's rewarded for a clean floor, but looking at what if the robot started to actually create a mess. So bumping into tables on purpose to knock things over, like plants, and then there's dirt on the floor. So now it's going to be cleaning up more dirt, so it gets a reward. So you want to make sure that you've thought about what that, if it's trying to like hack for the reward, that you've thought that through initially. And this also makes me think of there's a story about a dog in France. That's why I have Le Chien there. A dog in France was going by the Seine with its owner down in Paris, and a child fell into the river, the Seine, and the dog went in and got the child out of the river. And everybody was so excited and said, this dog is fantastic. This dog's wonderful. And it got tons of pats and love. And then a lot of kids near this dog started falling into the river. And it turned out that the dog had started to push kids into the river because it knew it could then jump in, save the child, and get rewarded. So we really don't want our systems to be like the dog going into the river. Some side effects with reinforcement learning could be things like, again, that breaking the obstacles, and then looking at distributional shifts too. So this goes back to sometimes the software behaves differently in different hardware. It can also behave differently in different environments. And this really, really matters in machine learning when we start thinking about things like autonomous vehicles, because remember that stop sign? Right. The unintentional thing was somebody wrote a backdoor so that they slapped a sticker up on the stop sign, the car would keep going. But what if that car hasn't been tested in very different environments, so different kinds of weather? And if you think about it, we're really, really good as human beings as figuring out when it's a stop sign, when it's a speed sign, even if it's covered in snow, when it's wet and rainy, when it's dark, when it's light. I mean, think about when you've got like that low winter sun going really hard right into your eyes. Like, we are able to identify things very easily under very, very different conditions. Systems are not like human beings, and we forget that all the time. It's really easy. Back when I was younger, there was that show, The Jetsons, on. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's this old cartoon that was supposedly set in the future. And they had this robot who was a maid, Rosie the maid. And it honestly, in the 60s, a lot of us kind of thought like, yeah, we're going to have maids, by 2000, because 2000 seems so far away to us. By 2000, we're going to have maids, right? People aren't going to have to do their own laundry. But it turns out that a lot of the stuff that robotics have to do that human beings do naturally is really hard for robotics. And it's great when they're repeating the same thing over and over, like on an assembly line. But when you've got this distributional change, when you've got to make these shift changes, humans are really good. And if you just want to like think about it right now, think about picking up a cup. You pick up cups all the time, all day, right? You pick up paper cups, plastic cups, ceramic cups. They're different levels of full. You don't pick it up and go, whoo, and fling it over your head. You pick it up accurately and get it to your mouth every single time. Think about the amount of calculation that you have to do just by grabbing that cup and bringing it up to your mouth. It's really complex. And that's one of the reasons that robotics has not been, that's one of the reasons that we don't have Rosie the robot, which I would like. But so again, these are just a few of the different models. Again, there's this full text that I've got down here for the research paper that I think is really good to go look at, threat modeling AI and ML. So I strongly recommend that you do take a look at that after this, if you're at all interested in it. But if you were going to go do threat modeling of AI and ML, you would do it similar to any other kind of threat modeling approach. And you would start off with a checklist. You want to make sure what it is that you would look for that could go wrong. So you start thinking about what are the things that could potentially go wrong. So we had talked about some of the modes that could go wrong. So you'd say, you know, how's our data look, right? Do we want to make sure that it's not poisoned? Is it not biased, that we feel confident about it, that there aren't, you know, backdoors? Who gave us the data? As we learned with Tay, when the data comes from basically anybody on Twitter trying to have some fun, it can go bad, you know, pretty quickly. Are you going to use online data stores? And that's a perfectly good way to do it. So at IBM, Watson for cybersecurity was trained with online stores, but that online information was carefully curated to ensure that Watson was getting data that was good, rather than, because there's a lot of stuff that's kind of like crazy on the internet too. So if you're going to use stuff that's online, make sure that you understand where it's coming from, you trust it, and also that the communication channel is strong and reliable on both ends, because that data, you may have gone to an online store and it appeared good when you grabbed it, but if there's a man in the middle attack, if you have a lack of integrity within the whole chain, it may be that you started out with good data, but by the time it hit your system, it wasn't good data anymore. So then you start getting into things like API security and how you're, you know, where you're pulling it from. And then you'd ask yourself things like, you know, what if this does go wrong? What if somebody was able to infer or invert my model and understand, and maybe to leak out some data about the training information? And then really importantly, what if the outputs aren't right? So again, those two really big numbers, if you multiply them, how do you know that those numbers, if your calculator was right or wrong, if you don't do some other set of calculations? And with most of our calculators, we trust them well enough. They're so good that we don't have to question. But with AI and ML, this is really pretty early days. And as people are creating new models, how do you know if that radiograph is right or not? How do you know if that car that you're putting out on the road is going to be able to respond to that stop sign accurately? So really taking a look at the outputs and being able to do some sort of test and to check on the outcomes of these machine learning models regularly, so that you know that you're looking at the right stuff. Some other things, you know, what could go wrong? Did you train with adversarial examples? So did you start doing if there was noise, for example, so that is it still going to be able to know it's a bicycle, or is it going to start thinking it's a rock hopper penguin? What if your model gets copied or stolen? And this is a big one for orgs that are building their entire business model out on AI and ML. Is that if their secret sauce gets stolen, that could really impact their ability to do business in the long run. And then what about if there's reputational damage? So somebody does attack your model, then what kind of negative damage could be done to your organization? So let's say, we've got our checklist. We understand our model of what can go wrong, what can't go wrong. We've got our checklist of what we want to look for specifically in our system. And then let's say we're going to look at something like adversarial perturbations within our ML model. And in this one, you know, what about targeted misclassification? So in this case, someone is on purpose putting noise into the image so that it will be misclassified by the model. So that's the threat, right? And the mitigation is, in this case, you could do things like you could have better model resilience. So you actually train that system, excuse me, with perturbed images, so that it can start to recognize, oh, I see, I don't have a high enough confidence that this is a bicycle. There's enough noise in here that, you know, I'm going to come out with a lower confidence classification potentially. So, but training it on adversarial perturbation, training it with things that have increased noise within them, that can actually make it a better system in the long run. And then, you know, using things like how confident it is to be able to help with model prediction, so that you start to mitigate. It doesn't say it's going to be perfect. There's never any perfect, but you start to mitigate the threat. Another big threat that we talked about was data poisoning. You know, in this case, for one example would be that there was actually some attackers that figured out, I'm so sorry, everybody. Attackers had figured out that that there was one kind of software that a piece of AV antivirus was looking for, and that they were contaminating. I'm sorry.
No worries. Yeah, feel free to get a drink of water or anything.
Wow, I am just so sorry.
No
So,
worries. It's awesome.
I know it must be like the spring, the allergies. But anyway, in this case, training out the model that if they saw this particular piece of code, that it was always going to be okay. And so that, attackers being able to start poisoning the data so that it would be, they could put anything they wanted, no matter how malicious it was, as long as it had a particular snippet of code in it. And then it was all deemed okay, or it ended with a particular snippet of code. So to mitigate for things like that, you could look for like drift. And in machine learning, actually most machine learning models drift toward bias. So you start looking at the drift by what's coming out of the model to see, if it may be going towards bias. And bias would be it's seeing things that are actually malicious as not malicious. For example, you can go the other way too. You can start actually classifying things that are not malicious as malicious. So you want to look on both ends. Look for that drift, look for it regularly, supervise what's coming out of the system. And then another thing that really helps with data poisoning prevention is good old input validation. Just make sure that you understand the data you're getting, that you've validated it, you're doing sanitization, and that you're also do integrity checking on the data that goes in and out. So just and if you do any programming, input validation, I'm sure it's very close, near and dear to your heart to prevent things like SQL injection attacks. And it's a similar concept with the data poisoning to prevent it. And then the last one that we're going to go over is model stealing. And this is when attackers are trying to figure out what your model is, what your secret sauce is, so that they can take it and use it. Or if we were like a credit bureau, our credit score, how we figure out your credit score, we don't want to tell that to everybody. Or if you're a credit company, how you detect fraud very quickly, maybe a model for your ML model. You don't want your competitor to get it, because then they're going to have your secret sauce too. And security, the way that we may see underlying model stealing be an impact would be if it was, again, used by an attacker to figure out how to obviate, to get around your model. And this can be things like understanding how it's learning what's malicious, and then doing something like low and slow and retraining that model once you know what it's doing, retraining it so that it's going to respond to your attack as though it's not malicious. And ways to minimize that, or you can minimize or obfuscate the details that are returned out of APIs, because a lot of ways that model stealing occurs is that you keep giving the system information and seeing what it comes back. And we used to do this a lot when, in the way early days of the web. You didn't just get like a 404 error, or I don't know. I mean, now you never see anything that gives you, well, Kate, almost never do you ever see a lot of detail. But back in the day, we would think, hey, the more data, the better. So if your system failed, you went to a website, you might see, a lot of information about where that page was within this, why it failed. And that gave the attacker information about, even if like, oh, which firewall was being used, what rule might have been triggered, like all kinds of stuff. So, you get better about obfuscating the details, the response. So if somebody's interacting with your model, they're not going to get this full explanation. And then also, well-informed queries. Well-formed queries can help a lot, so that you only allow, it's again similar if you've done any coding, you can do things like stored procedures and go back and only use certain queries on the database, because you don't want to leak out information. It's similar concept here, to just make sure that only well-formed queries can go to your model, and that your model's not spilling out too much information when that query goes awry. So that's it for this section. Again, I hope that this was of interest. I apologize about the coughing. But I hope that kind of gets you excited about machine learning and about AI, and about how important it is that we need people to study this, to get really smart about this, to be able to help us all to build these AI and ML. I genuinely believe we're not going to advance the practice and technology and or even the betterment of the world without AI and ML. So I really hope that you guys got excited about learning more about it and maybe becoming the next great data security scientists who are going to make sure that our AI and ML is strong and resilient in the future.
Yeah, thank you so much for that incredible talk. I'm sure all of us can agree that we learned so much about both cybersecurity and AI and ML, which was that really cool synergy. So yeah, I think we can spend just a few minutes to ask questions, maybe until 4:10. So I know a lot of people were typing some questions in the chat, but if some people could like raise your hand and maybe speak up and unmute to ask Ms. Kelly any questions. Or you can feel free to type that in the chat as well. Yeah, so I guess we're gonna take a few minutes for that.
I had a question. So I was wondering, so you know how you talked about how like bad data leads to things like the AI or like machine learning detecting things with bias or doing things it does based on your bad data. Isn't it easier to just implement guidelines on the AI rather than spending like a bunch of time making sure all the data you give it is correct?
Well, so the AI, how's the AI going to know what's good or bad data? So you could even, or how would you know all the potential guidelines? You might not need AI or ML if it's a simple set of guidelines. So if something just really simple, like, here's a simple one. If somebody's not 16 and a half years old, they can't get a driver's license. You don't need AI and ML to help you with that. All you need is a really simple rule that says, hey, how old are you? Give me your birth date. I can calculate how old you are. Now I know if someone can drive or not. So when it's really simple rules, you may not need AI and ML at all. ML is about letting the machines learn, so that it really is important to make sure that the data that they're learning from is well sanitized, is the data you want. For example, like with Tay, how would you have told Tay, that bot, what on Twitter to react to and interact with versus what's bad? How would you, start thinking about how would you tell a system, how would you code a system to know that someone saying Hitler was right is horrible? It's pretty complex. We as human beings are actually, the way that we speak in history and context, we know so much. And when you start trying to actually infuse that into a system, you realize the complexity of it. So generally, if it's simple enough for just pure rules-based, you don't need AI and ML. So that's why the data is so important, and making sure that we understand that the data that we're giving to the system has been curated and is being reasoned with appropriately is so critical. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, does anyone else have any questions? You can feel free to put it in the chat or speak up. I know Ms. Kelly talked about a lot. So if you have any questions from like bias or to like threat modeling or anything like that, now's your chance to ask. Okay, I saw a question earlier. Someone asked, how is ethics monitored in AI and ML?
Well, this is a really good question, because in large part, it depends on who's creating the AI and the ML and whether or not they're building, ethical awareness into it. And it's really broad reaching, because it's, who can use it, how it can be used, what happens with the outcomes. Talked about things like judicial sentencing, which starts to become a whole different part of social concern. So right now we're still actually in pretty early days, which is one of the reasons that I've been going around and talking about it and trying to have this conversation with the world. And I know a lot of people are starting to have this conversation now, because this isn't globally, it's not, there aren't, an easy set of rules. And even when you look at privately with companies, what they're building, this is really something that we as a community, all of us have to start thinking about, how's it going to be used? And that's a big part of I believe, of the threat modeling, because if there's bias in it, then that's a threat. So it's not, there's no easy answer. There's not one standard yet. There's no regulation. Look at us in the world. We're still trying to get privacy right with GDPR and CCPA. So ethics and AI and ML, this is going to be a big area. So if this in any way sparked something in you, this is an area where we need people to start studying and doing more work on.
Awesome. Yeah, I actually had a question as well. I know you talked a lot about how when bad actors know about the guidelines or how like the inner workings of an AI, they can go around it. But is there some sort of like trade-off between avoiding that, but also having transparency in terms of making sure all the data and there's no bias that is hard-coded into the AI as well? So yeah, I was just wondering between the trade-off between transparency, but also revealing too much.
No, you're exactly right. I mean, there can be trade-offs between transparency and being able to know all the data that's going into it, or even how that model's working. And there's this whole other thing, which is about, the neural networks, is that we don't even know how they're weighting internally, so as they learn over time. But you're right that there's an interesting trade-off between how much transparency we have and also giving away too much about how things are working. And that's actually, this is the work of threat modeling, is that you sit down and you talk about the pros and the cons and make the right decision, because there's no one right answer. That's the thing about threat modeling, about cybersecurity. There's no, they always joke, lawyers always say it depends, so do cybersecurity experts, because there's no right answer for everybody in every instance, in every case. So usually in each thing that you're going to build out, each system, you have to go through and assess what the trade-offs are and make the right decision for that system, for that organization at that time.
Got it. Yeah, thank you. Does anyone else have any final questions? Feel free to type in the chat or raise your hand. All right. If not, thank you so much, Ms. Kelly, for spending your time to talk with us today about threat modeling for AI and ML. I think it really just goes to show how important cybersecurity is with all this new technology and how we really have to be aware of the potential risks and also bias that can be.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Okay,
Bye.
bye-bye.
Thank you. And thanks for all the students. We hope you really enjoyed the speaker session and also today's class as well. Thank you so much, everyone. Okay, bye.